Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Chuwi Hi9 Pro. This is a low-cost Android tablet that sells for only $135, and for the price you're getting a few unique features. For one, it has a 8.4-inch 2K display. Chuwi always likes to slap high-resolution panels on all of their tablets, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because many times the processors aren't quite as fast as on more premium alternatives. However, you do get a very pin-sharp resolution, and as a result, for things like watching media, movies, and browsing the web, it's a very enjoyable experience. Secondly, the Chuwi Hi9 Pro also has a SIM card slot on the very top, so you can use a SIM ejector, which is included in the box, to have access to two SIM card slots, a micro and a nano, in addition to a kind of hybrid slot that can be used to pop in a micro SD card to expand on the built-in memory. It's kind of unique to find on a sub $200 tablet because it means it's also a giant phone or a phablet if you want to think about it. You can use it to answer phone calls, you can use it to connect to the internet, 4G LTE if there isn't a Wi-Fi available, and again, allows you to access the device in more areas than just Wi-Fi hotspot zones. Inside, the Chuwi Hi9 Pro has very familiar specifications as a budget Android tablet, inclusive of a MediaTek Helio X20 processor. This is a chipset that was first introduced in late 2016, early 2017, so it's not completely new to the market anymore, but it's a Deca core chipset, so it's not going to give you flagship level speed, but it should also perform all right for things like streaming videos and for light gaming, things like that. We also have an interesting aluminum back on the Hi9 Pro, which makes it feel quite sturdy. The top and bottom, though, are made out of plastic, a little reminiscent of some Xiaomi Redmi devices. We also have a 8-megapixel autofocus camera that's produced by Samsung. Shutter speed is on the slow side, and to be honest, no one's going to be taking too many photos with tablets anyways, but for things like document scanning, it does a pretty decent job. On the left-hand edge, you have access to metal-edged keys for the power as well as for the volume. I particularly like the red accented power key, which has an interesting texture to it, making it easier to find. It's pretty satisfying to click as well. And there's also a standard 3.5mm headphone jack, another bonus because for whatever reason, many premium tablets that we've been seeing, such as the Huawei MediaPad M5 omits even a headphone port and gives you only a Type-C port, which doesn't make much sense because on a tablet you can't tell me that there's not enough room to fit in a headphone port because that's just ridiculous. It doesn't support quick charging, so to fully charge up the 5,000 milliamp hour capacity battery on here, which is a little larger than average for an 8-inch tablet, will take roughly 2.5 to 3 hours to completely charge up. Since this thing does make phone calls as well, on the front there is a earpiece too, in addition to a microphone on the very bottom here, along with a front-facing camera for video chatting applications. A quick size comparison before we dive into the performance and software. Here it is next to the aforementioned Huawei MediaPad M5. This is also a 8.5-inch edition. And here it is next to a 8-inch tablet. This is a Playster. And thickness is pretty much on par on all three devices as well if we take a look at it from the edges here. So not too big of a difference. It's also very similar in terms of feeling to something like a iPad mini or a Xiaomi Mi Pad, like the Mi Pad 4, for instance. Now some folks have pointed out that the Mi Pad 4 is perhaps a better Android tablet, and I'm not going to argue with that, but you have to keep in mind that the Mi Pad 4 is also about twice the price of this Chuwi tablet. As usual, Chuwi is going for an ultra budget segment. They're trying to cram as high specifications as possible into a low-cost device. All right, so taking a closer look at the software here, one nice thing about this tablet is that Chuwi is not putting a skin on top of it, so it's leaving you with a very clean vanilla install of Android 8.0 Oreo. We also have the swipe up gesture that was first introduced on the Pixel phones that gives us access to our full array of applications, and we can see that it is a very clean install of Android, as we pointed out in our unboxing first impressions. So you won't find any bloatware on here aside from the regular Google apps. The base configuration of the Hi9 Pro comes with 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of storage, which is the version we're taking a look at now. Now I do wish that maybe there was 4 gigs of RAM because as we're heading into 2019 and beyond, it seems like web pages are getting more and more taxing on processors, and it seems like if you want to multitask fluidly, you do need to have more RAM on devices, whereas a few years ago I would say that 3 gigs is more than sufficient. You can tell that there is a little bit of jumpiness as well as we are swiping between kind of the main panels here. There's a slight hesitation, especially as you have a handful of apps open in the background as we do right now. And that's simply because of the 2K panel that Chuwi has chose to use. If the processor was pushing a less pixel dense full 1080p panel, for instance, it would feel a little smoother. So that is one downside. But of course, the flip side is you do have a very beautiful display to look at. You can tell that again, it's a very vivid panel as far as IPS LCD screens are concerned. I do think this is one of the highest quality panels I've seen for a sub $150 tablet. So props to Chuwi for making this possible. Viewing angles are really wide and generous. Colors are very natural looking. And overall, it's a laminated panel as well. So there's no gap between the glass, which is curved on the edges, as well as the screen underneath. Only downside is it doesn't get terribly bright. As you can see, we're at maximum brightness right now, and it may struggle a little bit in terms of outdoor visibility. It does get reasonably dim when you turn it all the way down, but otherwise I do wish it could be a little bit brighter. Moving on to battery performance, as aforementioned, with 5,000 milliamp hours, it seems quite reasonable on paper. And in real-world performance, I would say it's okay. It does drain a little bit faster just because, again, of that really high-resolution display. So you are looking at roughly 8 to 9 hours of screen on time with this particular tablet, which again is fair, but definitely could be longer. If you have Wi-Fi in addition to 4G LTE turned on all the time, it's going to drain closer to about 7 hours or so of screen on times. Let's try playing back one of our own videos here and crank up the volume.
For OS reviews, you're watching our video review of the Xiaomi Mi A2 Lite. Like the name implies, this is a smaller, less expensive version of the Mi A2, and it also runs on Android One, which is a clean, vanilla, unsolicited version of Android that has faster updates and more support down the road, and a launcher experience that's very similar to what you'll find on the much more expensive Pixel phones. Of course, being the less expensive variant of the two, it also comes with less powerful hardware, including a aging Snapdragon 625 processor, which is octa-core and clocked at 2 GHz.
Let's pause it there. Overall, the video watching experience is, again, quite good. It keeps up with the video streaming and scrubbing really well, so you can very quickly toggle between parts of the video. I did find the antenna in terms of the reception of both Wi-Fi and 4G to be stronger than average, so perhaps using plastic on the sides of the tablet, on the top and the bottom, was actually a good move, because sometimes when I couldn't get any reception on a phone, I could actually still get around 3 bars of reception on the tablet. And when it comes to audio, as you kind of heard from our previous video there, I would say it's alright. It's better than expected for a rear-mounted single-firing speaker, but it's not outstanding by any means. I think that with larger bezels, on the front here, they could have stuck a speaker here or somewhere on the sides, and it would have sounded better. But it's quite clean and already a step up compared to past Chuwi tablets we've seen in terms of the quality. So as an Android 8.0 Oreo device, we do have access to all the traditional kind of gestures like long holding, similar to Force Touch, to access contextual menus, to jump directly into settings within certain apps, which is quite useful. In addition, there's all the gestures such as double tapping on the volume on the power key 2 times to instantly jump into the camera app if you want to snap a quick image. Now, the biggest downside of this particular camera, even though it's on a tablet, which not many people will probably use as their primary shooter in the first place, is going to be the shutter speed. It's quite slow, and when it comes to capturing a shot, it takes almost an entire second to snap. The good thing is the quality of the images is better than expected. Interface here, though, looks very dated. It almost looks like an Android 4.1 or 4.2 device, so it doesn't look that great. But there is HDR that you can toggle on, there's panoramic, and you can capture videos up to 1080p. So taking a quick look at some sample shots here, again, the takeaway is quality is actually slightly better than expected, especially for things like document scanning. You can very legibly make out all the text, which I think is one of the more important things, and the overall colors are also quite accurate as well. So the sensor they're using isn't really a big problem. Even in nighttime environments, you can still get some detail if you hold still. There isn't any optical or even software stabilization, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, what we don't have on the tablet, however, would be any additional gestures from the manufacturer. So there aren't things like double tap to wake, there's nothing like drawing a pattern to launch instantly into an app or anything like that. The Chuwi Hi9 Pro does not have a fingerprint scanner, nor does it have face unlock. So when it comes to security options, you do have to rely on a PIN or a password, which is a little bit old school. Let's take a quick look at web browsing performance by jumping into Chrome. And you can tell that the, again, accelerometers there take a split second to rotate. I would say the overall performance is slightly below, a Snapdragon 625 when it comes to real-life usage. There's definitely a little bit more lag. It's simply because I think, again, of the super high-resolution display which Chuwi has decided to use. The Helio X20 is still a pretty decent processor, but again, on such a high DPI count on a relatively larger screen, it does seem to struggle a little bit more. So this is particularly important if you plan on using this for gaming, because that's where you're going to notice more choppiness in the animations and frame rates, which is not going to be quite as ideal. But for things like media consumption, it does, have a great advantage. It's actually doing a pretty good job of keeping up, and scrolling seems smooth without any stuttering or any choppiness, nor does it have any kind of checkerboard patterning as we are moving in and about, so that seems to be quite good. We do have just a very standard layout as far as the Chrome browser, in addition to things like the keyboard is concerned. Overall, the screen is quite responsive and supports up to 5 fingers for multi-touch. No real complaints there. You can also use swipe for faster text entry or use a microphone for voice entry as well. Let's try loading up another page like CNET just to see how it handles, again, these more complex pages. And again, speeds using both Wi-Fi and 4G are much faster than expected. They are, again, loading up very quickly for a low-end device. That's one of the most impressive things, is going to be how good the reception quality of this tablet is. So moving more into kind of the performance of the processor, again, the Helio X20 chipset here is a Deca core chip. So we have 2 large cores, which are clocked at 2.3 gigahertz, 4 which are clocked at 1.83, and then 4 more which are kind of the low-end energy-efficient chips clocked at 1.4 gigahertz, used for idling and apps which are in the background, for instance. So overall, it's a pretty interesting architecture, and even though it's not the newest anymore, in terms of the benchmarks we can take a look at here with Antutu, the average is going to be around 85,000, with a maximum being around 96,000. And a quick look at gaming. So here is Tank Hero. It's a kind of 3D title here that we can use in an arcade style to move around and then have the ability to kind of shoot these bombs at our kind of enemy tanks and progress through the levels. So you can tell that in terms of animations and speeds, it's doing all right. Now for heavier titles such as PUBG Mobile or Asphalt 9, it's going to struggle more. You have to play at the lowest frame rate settings. In addition, it's going to have quite a bit of jumpiness when it comes to frame rates. It's still loadable and playable, but you have to use a lot more patience. So that's been the Chuwi Hi9 Pro, and overall I'm again quite impressed with this tablet for several reasons. I think it's a great evolution for Chuwi because it shows that these entry-level tablets are just getting better and better. Just a few years back, we could take a look at maybe a $200 tablet that had, a quad-core chipset by MediaTek or by Intel Atom, and coupled with 2 gigs of RAM, and now we have devices with a Deca core chipset and 3 gigs of RAM, as well as a 2K display for about half the price of that. And yes, we are still complaining about some minor details here, but the takeaway is they've evolved in leaps and bounds. And for Chuwi, at least, it's a tablet where all the pieces are finally kind of coming together. It's a device that I would not have a problem with using for consuming media on a daily basis. I could see myself coming back to this again and again for watching YouTube, browsing the web, things like that in bed, on the couch, and taking it with me since it is so lightweight and inexpensive. The future is very bright, and again, if you're looking for a low-cost tablet, your budget doesn't stretch beyond 150 bucks, I think that this is a very strong option to consider, especially if you want a high-res display for consuming media. You can check out more details in the links down below, but for now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Chuwi Hi9 Pro.